Good evening. Welcome to the second part of our Advent Bible study. As you know, we've been going through the Bible from the beginning to the end, talking about the hope of Advent. I hope you enjoyed last week. We've been recalling the story of redemption that was in place from the beginning. And last time we talked about sin entering the garden. We talked about Adam and Eve giving over to the lies of the serpent, disobeying God, and bringing death and suffering upon the earth. But immediately after, we see God in His grace bringing life in the midst of tragedy and in the midst of death. God Himself foretelling His Son coming to this earth to crush the head of the serpent. Interestingly enough, as we continue to read in Genesis, God blesses us with somewhat of a dress rehearsal, peeling back the curtain on what His redemption plan was. And so we will now move a few chapters later, and still in Genesis, to Genesis 22. And here we will see one of the most important and humbling interactions in the Bible. But first, let's get a little context of what is going on here. We'll go back to chapter 17. Here we see God revealing Himself to Abraham. He was Abram at the time. God had not quite changed his name. And in doing so, He makes a covenant with him. And He promises him that Abraham will see a multitude of nations birthed through him. And Abraham obviously was taken aback because he was old, so rightfully so. The Bible says that Abram fell on his knees and on his face and laughed, saying that I am 100, Sarah is 90. How could we conceive? And how could they conceive? That was outside of the realm of possibility, or so they thought. Yet they believed, and God delivered on His promise. And Abraham and Sarah were finally blessed with a child in their old age. And they were rightfully so filled with the immense joy of being able to finally hold an offspring of their own. But then we get to chapter 22. And here God does something that is incredibly confusing to Abraham and quite frankly confusing to us as well, because He commands him to take his son up the mountain, his only son up the mountain, to sacrifice him. Imagine the absolute terror that is going through Abraham's mind, because he's been finally blessed with a son, and God has promised that a multitude of nations were going to come from his offspring. And yet, after God has finally made good on His promise to give him a son, now it seems like He is just going to rip it all away. And that is incredibly confusing for Abraham. Yet, he trusted. He trusted and he obeyed. So he and Isaac started walking up the mountain. Now we're actually going to read from Genesis 22. So if you want to get your Bibles, you can do that now and turn there with me to Genesis 22. And as we read, I want you to listen for the similarities between this situation and things that will happen many years in the future with Jesus. See how this was a walkthrough, that dress rehearsal of what was to come. Read with me, Genesis 22. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. He said, Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father, Abraham, my father. And he said, Here I am, my son. He said, "Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." And they went, both of them together. So he is having to essentially not deceive, but he knows that God will provide. He knows that God will provide. He's not sure how he will, but in the comfort of his son, he is not telling him up until this point what is about to happen, but pretty sure Isaac knows. And when they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac, his son, and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here I am." He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, "The Lord will provide." As it is said to this day, "On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided." Look at how beautiful this visual is. They had no idea at the time, but this scene is giving us just a small sneak peek into what is going to be done many years later through Jesus. Isaac, Abraham's only son, Jesus, God's only son, walks up the mountain carrying the wood on which he would be sacrificed, just as Jesus carried his cross up the hill to his death. He willingly and obeying the Father, preparing his heart for death, trusting that God's will would be done. But this is where the similarities break between Isaac and Jesus. Because as Isaac was about to die, God then shows what Jesus is going to do, because a substitution was given. As we saw at the end of this, God made a way for Isaac to live, just as he has made a way for us to live. Just as Abraham was going to complete the sacrifice, God tells him to stop. Then Abraham sees the ram trapped in the thicket, the substitution for death, the sacrifice that takes Isaac's place at the altar, just as Jesus took our place on the cross. And because of their obedience, God continued to bless them. Nations did come out of Abraham, and from this lineage comes Jesus, born to fulfill all of the promises that God had made from the very beginning. Merry Christmas.